Better Together with Maria, your life improvement series.
Yeah, the courage to be rubbish. This is for real. You want to make a lot more progress on what matters. You've got to give up the perfectionism. Especially in the stuff that like isn't even visible. Yeah, so let's, I'll use an example from my own life because this was quite uncomfortable for me. I started the podcast, I mentioned that to you.
Yeah.
And this was in the midst of the pandemic. I don't know anything about podcasting. I feel like it's time to do it. The opportunities to do it. Well, it was in process right before the pandemic. Like it's with a production company. It's a great location. Jimmy Kimmel had selected the location because he's in partnership with Wheelhouse, who produces my podcast.
Oh, and yeah. I know those guys. Yeah. Okay, great.
There's a shower in their Wheelhouse house down in LA.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, this should be where the podcast is." So we were like, "Yeah, we should get Jimmy. He'll be the first."
You know what? It's so funny because when I met with them, they were talking about this. We're thinking about using the shower to podcast, and so
exactly.
Okay.
And so I was
so
to be their
funny.
first podcast in the shower, the whole thing. Then the pandemic happens. So now we're like, you couldn't even buy recording equipment at the beginning of the pandemic. There was nowhere to get it. You couldn't get it online. Everyone was buying stuff up. There was no, you couldn't get. And so we're using this old microphone. I don't know what I'm doing. I really felt hugely out of my element because it's a new thing. And just because, you've done speaking or you've done writing, that doesn't mean you're good at this. Podcasting is its own thing.
Of course.
Interviewing is its own thing, its own art, its own craft. And so, I had to make a decision. Do I want to be a perfectionist about this? Or am I going to have the courage to be rubbish? Just start. Yeah, it's like the shift between, am I going to learn to do, sometimes means you're never going to do, or you're going to do to learn. And the discomfort for me is I like to do stuff excellently. I like to do stuff as well as I can. I'm a believer in that. But if I had taken that approach in this endeavor, we would not have begun. And in fact, it's funny because it's there's a comparative point where a friend of mine bought equipment the same week that I was going to launch. And they were the same idea. Let's do a podcast. They're going to do a podcast. I'm going to do a podcast. And they never started. They got the equipment. They got it done. And I don't know exactly why, but I think it probably is because they wanted to do it so well or something got in the way of taking action, the courage to be rubbish. And I have done this now for several months, not quite a year. For that whole time, I have had a slight feeling of failing, a slight feeling of like, I just wish this was better. I wish that we had this down, but just be rubbish, be okay, just keep going, get a bit better as you're doing it, learn a bit more. I don't really mean produce the worst that you can produce. Of course, that's not what it means, but it means don't be so caught up in perfectionism you don't go forward. And literally 2 weeks ago, we got the news that it was in the top 10 podcasts on Apple in self-improvement. I am not kidding. I'm no pretense here. Like that's the first good news we've had. And that's not quite true, but it was like, that was the first time that we actually were all applauding. It was like spontaneous, this is fantastic. And the next week, this is last week, it was in top 5. So this is now just on the verge of becoming a real thing. And we would be at 0 if we hadn't had the courage to be rubbish.